All right. Well, welcome back to episode 2 of Dishing the Dirt, a podcast where we dish the dirt about practicing sustainability through the seasons. My name is Jackie Lebouitz. I'm the Chemicals and the Environment Agent at IFAS Extension Sarasota County, and I am joined by my lovely, reputable co-host,
Mm.
Randall Penn.
Well, thank you for that introduction. My name's Randall Penn. I'm the waste reduction agent here at the Sarasota County Extension, and I'm excited for our guest today.
Oh, yeah. So, a certain Michael D'Imperio.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to be here with you, Randall. All right, my name's Mike D'Amperio. I'm the Water Resources Agent here at IFAS Extension Sarasota County. So I focus on everything fresh water. That's going to be water quality. And a lot of what I do with water quality comes down to nutrient management, especially on the landscape. And water conservation is a big part of what I do as well. And again, that comes back down to the landscape because as a Florida homeowner, if you have an automatic irrigation system, you're probably using well over 50% of your total water outside just to keep that lawn going. So we're here to talk about that.
Absolutely. So, rainy season officially starts in our county June 1st. And that's also the start of our fertilizer ordinance, which is the no to nitrogen law, as some call it informally. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the details of that. But I did want to kind of open the discussion with rainy season as a whole. So, have you noticed, Michael, may I call you Mike?
Yeah, no, Mike is good, please.
Mike, I wanted to ask you, with rainy season over the last number of years, have you noticed any trends in weather patterns when we're getting our total rainfall? Is it happening sooner or later, or is it just all kind of random? And where can you go to check on stuff like that if you're curious?
Yeah, so there I'll get into where to check on that and then what our actual data looks like. But first, just my own personal anecdotal observations. What I've noticed over the past couple years is it seems like we're getting less of those regular afternoon showers. I know I got nice and used to every day, 4 o'clock, it pours and then it stops. That's getting a little bit more sporadic just from what I've seen. And I've also noticed that it seems like we're drier for a little bit longer in the season, and then we get all the rain right at once, and then we dry out pretty good again. So if you look at the actual data over the past couple years, it shows that Sarasota County gets about 52 inches of rain per year. So if you think about that in a calendar, that kind of sounds like 1 inch per week, right? We have 52 weeks in a calendar year, but that's not really how it works. We get about twice as much weekly rain in the rainy season than we do during the dry season. And if you look at the extremes in the error, it can be multiple times. And
Yeah.
yeah, you can go find that data yourself. So we have the Sarasota County Water Atlas. You can go onto the Water Atlas. I believe it's run out of USF, and
Yeah.
they have the historical data for the rainfall amounts over years. So you can look at whatever span of years you want.
That's true with that near real time rainfall map. And we'll link that in the show notes. So, for those of you who maybe didn't tune into our last episode, for any resources that we mentioned during the show, we will make sure those are available to you in the show notes. So check the description of the podcast to see the latest show notes. And I will say I really like that map. I think it's great because you can look at the weekly data too, and that can help you kind of account for how much rainfall you've gotten. And then if you are someone who has an in-ground irrigation system, aka a system that has those sprinklers that come up and water your lawn, you can kind of use those numbers to figure out how much to put down. And how much do you put down on your grass?
Yeah, so let's get to that in kind of like a roundabout way. So for you were mentioning looking at the map and the data. So when I was talking previously, I said that there's, a margin of error. And that's what's really good about that data is the way that it's laid out on the Water Atlas. It's a bar graph and it shows you the error margin. So if you look at that when you're looking at the past couple of years, you can see that error margin, and that'll extend from below the top of the bar to well above the top of the bar. So you can look at that and say, like, okay, the average is 3 inches this month historically. It may be one, it may be five. So it shows you that, margin of error. So that can help you plan for more extremes as well, which is great. But as far as knowing how much to apply, the first thing that you want to get right is your timing, right? So we have that seasonality. Like I said, most of that 52 inches comes during the rain season. So there's two separate things to keep in mind there. One is that you, by state law, need to have an operational rain shutoff device, right? So that you're not irrigating in the rain. Obviously, if it's pouring out, you probably shouldn't be watering your lawn. It's a little redundant. There's a couple different ways you can go about that. You can get like a traditional rain sensor, which works off of expanding corks that sort of trigger a shutoff button in the device. Now we also have some smart systems that go off of local weather service, so it can help predict. There's evapotranspiration and wind monitors that can give us additional data. And we even have some soil moisture sensors, which are really cool because they go at the root zone of your turf. So you can get a picture of how much moisture is at the root zone. But all that said, the point of having all of those is so that you are not watering when it's raining or when it just rained and there's still sufficient moisture in the soil, or with some of the smart ones that go off of the weather service if it's about to rain. So, that's all really good to keep in mind. You don't want to be doubling it. But in the extreme, you also don't need to water as much in the dry season, which is a bit counterintuitive because it seems like you need to water more in the middle of the winter when we're bone dry, think like February. But in reality, when it's both dry and cool at the same time, that grass is in a bit of a dormant state.
Yeah.
It's a different situation when it is, late spring where it's very dry but also warm. That's a different situation because your grass doesn't really want to be dormant. It's warm out, it's ready to go. But in the middle of the winter, it's very dry, it's cool, so your turf is dormant, which means that you can actually skip every other week. So that's something
I've
else to
heard
keep
that.
in mind.
Yeah, every 10 to 14 days, I think you can get away with skipping your irrigation according to, is it the water management district?
Yeah, so that's a campaign from the Southwest Florida Water Management District. They just have a skip a week campaign in the
Mhm.
winter. But yeah, people don't think of that because it really is counterintuitive. You think it's not raining, it's bone dry, I should probably water. But if that grass is asleep, you probably don't need to.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, there's a lot going on with this that I didn't even think about. So I think of Sarasota County, we have a lot of new residents from Ohio,
Oh, yeah.
Pennsylvania, Michigan, and they're coming in droves,
That was then.
right? So, coming as one of those people in the past, we waited for the winter to thaw out, and then went out and fertilized our lawns and did all this stuff. Seems like Florida may have a different pattern with that. And so, you know, I bet it's a challenge for you to reach out to these homeowners and kind of break that cycle they're used to understand the Florida environment.
Yeah, that's a really good point because at the end of the day, that's what I'm doing with all of my program areas is essentially teaching people what it's like down here in Florida. Because, yeah, you're right. It's completely different. Growing up in the Northeast, the grass was just different all around. It was softer, it was thinner. It didn't look so St. Augustine. It was just different because we have cool season grasses up north. We have warm season grasses down here. They're a bit different. They tend to be more running instead of just clumping, and you treat them different too. So there's a lot that goes into managing your lawn down here in Florida. It is a bit different. And you mentioned something really important, which is the waiting for the fall, going out and fertilizing. So that's another thing that we need to keep in mind with the seasonality, right? Because if you think about what we just said, that grass for a period of time in the winter is kind of asleep. which means that it's not going to be super hungry for that fertilizer. So there's nothing legally wrong with fertilizing in the winter. That's permissible. That's fine. But your grass doesn't need that as much. And when your grass doesn't need it, it's not taking it up as quickly. And if it's not taking it up as quickly, when it does decide to rain, that has more of a potential of washing away, getting into our water sources. And that is a common cause of pollution is nutrients from things like fertilizer.
So, as a homeowner, let's say I don't know these things and I water during a ban or I fertilize during a time when I'm not supposed to, and things like that. Can I get in trouble for that? Is there a penalty, a fine? What can happen to me?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what the penalty is, but I know that it can go over to code enforcement. The unfortunate truth is there's not a ton of enforcement just because of, employee power. We're only so big.
Right.
So, that's the unfortunate truth about it. My job really is just to educate people about these things. Now, for a commercial applicator, so like a commercial landscaper, that would be a bit easier for someone to catch.
Yeah.
And, Joe Smith throwing some weed and feed in the backyard where no one can see.
Oh, that
I'm not saying to do that. Like, please do not do that. Joe, wherever you are, don't do that.
don't do it.
This is not permission.
Yeah, and I can jump in there real quick if you don't mind and talk a little bit more about that. So, one thing too, right? We don't want to be putting down too much nitrogen. Same thing with too much water onto our grass because there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. And especially when it comes to pests. So this is kind of one of my specialty areas is how do we keep pests away from the home and the landscape? Oh my gosh, chinch bugs on the St. Augustine grass, mole crickets, grubs. A lot of these pests love nitrogen. Excess nitrogen in the landscape is like an open invitation to say, "Hey, look at all this fresh new growth. We're full of nutrients. Come eat us." And I know the grass isn't actually saying that, but the point still stands that if you're putting down too much nitrogen, you are very likely to encounter pests. And the same goes for that water, that irrigation. So you have to think about it that way, where you're not trying to get away with anything. You're actually actively harming your plants and your landscape, especially your grass, which is a little sensitive, a little high maintenance, let's be honest, compared to some of our other Florida friendly alternatives. Not saying to get rid of your grass. Grass still serves a purpose, and it's way better than that astroturf that people are starting to put in their landscapes, plastic stuff. Not so good. Um, but overwatering, right? You're really discouraging those roots from growing deeper into the soil. That's a big problem, right? We want the longer the roots, the better. And grass naturally has pretty short roots. And then if you're just constantly watering and watering, that water is going to sit there. That's not getting used, and you get root rot. You get all these different pathogens coming in too, beyond just the pests, and causing issues for your grass. So it's a bad formula, bad combo.
Yeah, and another important thing to remember is whether or not you're on reclaimed water,
Oh,
or not even reclaimed water, but sometimes with a well. So another thing to be considered about is the amount of salt in your irrigation water. That can come from a couple places. It's not really going to be in your potable water if you're watering with potable. If you have reclaimed water, there is, a certain level of salts that might be present in there. And same with a well. We get saltwater intrusion in this part of the state, so sometimes wells can be a little bit salty as that groundwater sort of shifts, especially once you get out closer to the coast, out towards our islands. That can be more and more of an issue with salt in the wells that you're using to irrigate. And salt is also found in fertilizer.
very true.
Yeah. So the nutrients, the nitrogen in fertilizer is usually going to be in a salt form, right? So when you are applying that fertilizer, you're adding more salt. And in a normal, like very rainy situation, if it's raining all the time, you're going to have a way of flushing that salt out of the soil. But if you are over irrigating with salted water, and if you're adding fertilizer, which contains additional salt during that very dry time of year, you don't have anything to flush that out of the soil, and it can start to build up until you get a good rain. And the difficult thing is that salt stress looks a lot like drought stress, right?
Yeah,
It's
well,
going to cause a lot of the same symptoms. So typically, what people will do to correct what they think is drought stress is water more. But if you are watering more with the same water, you are maybe just adding more and more salt until you can flush it out with a different water source.
that's a really good point, and I do wanna just touch base with our audience. So for folks who maybe are new to managing a lawn in Florida or maybe just don't really know, I mean, I've heard that there's, like, 3 things to be on the lookout for when it comes to our lawns and figuring out if they need more water. What are those signs?
Yeah, so there's going to be three major things that you want to look for, and they're all going to be visual, right? So this is something that you can tell just by visually glancing at your lawn. One needs a little bit of movement, and that one is looking to see how quickly the grass bounces back after you step on it. So, nice hydrated turf, when you walk across that lawn, it's going to bounce right back after you're done stepping on it, right? It's going to kind of come right back up to you. But if that turf is dehydrated and drought stressed, it's going to sort of hold your footprint. So if you walk through your yard and then you look back behind you and you can still see some of your footprints, like you just walked through sand, that is a strong indicator that your grass is not doing too hot
A little
with the
thirsty.
water. Yeah, it's a little thirsty. Yeah, there's not enough water in those cells to keep them rigid enough to bounce back. So that means that
Makes sense.
it is time to water. And a lot of times we tell people to wait until they see these signs of drought stress to water. So I'll get to why that's important in a second after we cover the other two signs. Yeah, so another one of the signs is folded leaf blades. So if those leaf blades start to fold up, think, back to early years hot dog style. They're not gonna fold hamburger style, right? They're gonna fold hot dog style.
Like that.
Yeah, I mean they could. Like that would be wild. But yeah. So yeah, they'll fold hot dog style. And that is another sign that your grass is needing a drink. And then the third has to do with the color. Your grass is usually going to be a nice green color. And if it is starting to get pretty drought stressed, it may have like a grayish to like gray blue sort of tinge to it. That's a good sign that you're also underwatering that turf.
Yeah. No, excellent. So those are things to be on the lookout for. And we're not saying never water your grass. It's just if you're really worried when you start to see those signs, that's maybe when you want to figure out how to supplement that rainfall with irrigation, especially during the drier parts of the year. But here in rainy season, right, having that operational rain shutoff device, very important. And making sure you have a working irrigation system is also important too. Now, I've heard through the grapevine, Mike, that we offer a free irrigation evaluation service to members of the Sarasota County community. Is this true?
Yeah, you heard absolutely right from that grapevine. So, yeah, we do offer free irrigation evaluation services that's open to any resident community management association or business in Sarasota County. If you're in a smaller municipality within Sarasota County, the city of Sarasota, Venice, Nokomis will still come out. There's nothing wrong with that. So as long as you're within those Sarasota County boundaries, we will come out and evaluate your irrigation system. We run the whole thing while we're there, one zone at a time. We count how many sprinkler heads there are, what type. We do some calculations back here at the office to see how much water you're using. And then any issues that we see, and there's usually some because let's face it, most people are running this irrigation system in the very early hours of the morning, which is what we recommend, but it means you can't really see it. So yeah, hopefully. So any issues that we see, we'll make note of, and you get a full report with areas to pay attention to, maybe change, suggestions on run times and frequency, because you really want to try to aim for 3/4 of an inch of water per week.
Mm.
That's one time per week. And the reason we say one time is because you want to water infrequently, first of all, because that 3/4 of an inch is about enough to saturate the top 9 inches or so of our sandy soil, which is going to be the root zone. So you're training those roots to grow deeper, but also because we have water restrictions here in Sarasota County, right? So depending on the last digit of your address number, you're going to have 1 day a week allotted to where you are allowed to irrigate. There are exemptions for people who are on reclaimed and people who use drip irrigation or hand watering, establishing new plants. But as long as your plants are established, whether that's turf or ornamentals, it's still my recommendation to try to follow that, even if you are exempt from the ordinance. It's still good to be a responsible neighbor, responsible resident. And let's face it, reclaimed water, people think it's free. It's still subject to supply and demand.
Oh, yeah.
We can't just use it all the time.
Yeah, I've heard about some pressure issues even sometimes in communities where people are taking out too much reclaimed. It's coming from this shared pond, and all of a sudden they can't really run the system efficiently because there's no water to.
Yeah, and that's actually happened sometimes when communities are watering with, these ponds that are supplemented with a well too. You can overdraw during a certain amount of time and sorry, you're not allowed to draw any more water now. And then what? Except from hooking up to your potable, which is not a good idea either.
So what would you say are the common things that you find when you go out? Is it broken sprinkler heads? I know that's like I lose most. Does your mow up?
Yeah.
Or is always see them like pointed the wrong way, right? When you're
Spraying the
walking your dog, you're getting
sidewalk.
wet or something like that.
Yep.
I mean, it's probably constant, right?
It is. So I don't know if I've ever showed up to a house and that wasn't an issue where, they're spraying the sidewalk and your sidewalk isn't really going to benefit, at that point it's not going to grow any faster by watering it. So just don't, because all that water, A, you're wasting it, and then B, you're just making runoff that's going down the storm drain. And here in Florida, the storm drains don't go to a treatment center. They go to the nearest body of water, probably the pond right behind your house. So for that aspect, you don't want to be doing that, but it's also wasteful. And my personal observational estimate is that probably about 70% of the homes that I go visit either don't have a rain sensor at all or don't have one working. So that's another big issue. And again, that is required by state law. People
Yeah.
are generally unaware.
Yeah, I would think so. You mentioned homeowners, but you also said businesses can do this as well.
Yeah.
So do you get a lot of calls from businesses?
No, this
number
is
one?
actually something I'm trying to
And-
break
and,
into. I
you
haven't
know,
done any yet, but if you are a
collaboration.
business,
Yeah.
please.
And you see it a lot. I work with the Sarasota County Green Business Partnership Program. Shameless plug there for my program. But one of the things we do is try to get businesses to use those shutoffs because it's a bad look, right? When it's raining outside and they're running the different things.
And it's a bad look for these big managed communities too. I'm not going to say any names, but some of these large communities that are taking up big portions of our population, you drive through and you're watering the street during a rainstorm. That's kind of again, not a good look.
Yeah, people see it. They point it out.
Yeah.
I've heard from many people just outside of work too, going,
Oh yeah.
look at that. It just rained and there they are with the sprinklers on an
actively
hour later.
raining.
That's one of the worst.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, people who aren't even in this space, they notice that, they point that out because it looks kind of silly.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to just kind of bring in the conversation a little bit, mention a couple of resources too for our listeners, which again, you will find in the show notes. So please do check those. If you are outside of unincorporated Sarasota County, you might have other water restrictions to follow. So it's a little bit of a different fit depending on where you live, and it's important to be familiar with what your local ordinances are. We do have a blog that goes through each of our municipalities and the county border and walks you through kind of the big hits for those water restrictions through through the entire year. And for fertilizer as well, there is a really cool app, which I'll make sure that you listeners, have your little fingers on after you listen to the show. Again, in the show notes. So it's this fertilizer ordinance app. So this is going to be, again, depending on where you are in the state of Florida or even within Sarasota County, you might have a slightly different start date for that ordinance. So check out that app. You can put in the address of either your property, or let's say if you're an applicator or a professional, you can put in the address of that property that you're servicing, and you can see exactly what rules you have to follow. Some are voluntary, some are mandatory. So check out that app, have it bookmarked, because it really does come in handy during the rainy season and really throughout the entire year, right? You need to know how much to put down as well. So I'm going to go ahead, just ask if there's anything else maybe you want to tell
Yeah,
us
no, I'm
before
just
we
going to
go.
follow up on what you were just talking about because regardless of if you're going to use that app or not, every county is going to have an extension office in it.
Mm,
We are in every one of the counties throughout Florida.
67
We
counties, in fact.
and counting. You can never know. But yeah, so we are in every county throughout the state. This is what we really do is specialize in this information and helping people find the resources for their local ordinances. But we're not the only county that has this irrigation evaluation service either. There are several counties in the state that offer a very similar service. So you can always reach out to your local extension office and see if that's something that they do. And I would recommend that for anybody with an automatic irrigation system, no matter what your water source is.
Yeah.
If anything, just to, check to make sure you might be able to be saving money or at the very least improve the health of your landscape.
Yeah, 100%. See what resources are near you. You'd be surprised, especially through extension. There's a lot of great free goodies, and take advantage. It's all for helping improve our local water quality, which is a really big thing here at Extension and in the state of Florida. We want our waters to be top quality. So, Randy, anything from you before we sign off?
No, just from the homeowner side, there's a lot going on, and it sounds like there's a lot of resources, websites. Really need to check when you can do it.
Yeah.
Know the last digit of my address. That seems
Mhm.
like a helpful information, and just kind of follow those rules, especially as we are moving through our rainy season here. So.
Oh, yeah. And I know that can be overwhelming. Like you said, as a homeowner, that's a lot to remember, especially if you're just moving here. It's a lot. But again, that's what we're here for. I can always actually have a conversation with you and send you these resources for yourself. So,
Yeah. So reach out anytime is what we're saying here. And like I said, some helpful resources in the show notes. That's it for episode 2. I hope you enjoy your month of June. And we'll see you next month for, a little bit about plastics. All right. Bye for now.